Hello and welcome back to the Pacific Coast Model Works YouTube channel. Hey, in this episode, I need to put together some sidewalks for the town of Laughlin, and that means I get the opportunity to talk to you about how I do pavement. I've seen a lot of conversation recently online about different ways of doing pavement, and I'm not saying that my way is the perfect way, but it is pretty inexpensive, pretty simple, and very effective. The main thing about doing pavement is painting it to make it look like concrete or asphalt. I mean, no matter which method you use to simulate pavement, you're going to have to paint it to accurately represent the material you're modeling. So I'm going to go through that as well as showing you just the simple way that I do pavement as I create sidewalks for the town of Laughlin. Welcome back. So it seems like there's constant conversation online about how to do pavement, how to do roadways, sidewalks, platforms. And there are all kinds of different ways that people do it. I see people doing cast in place, where they build up forms and they do it with plaster. Now, I've always been weary of that method because I feel like that thin plaster is going to break pretty easily. I see a lot of people use styrene. To me, that's just a tremendously expensive way to go. This is what I use. This is Matboard, the type that's used for picture framing, which I purchase at an art supply or craft store. I get a piece that's 32 by 40 inches for $12. This is not poster board. It's actually got some thickness to it. But yeah, this is what I use for all of my pavement, my flat pavement. And that's whether it's on a flat area or on a hill. I use this for the sidewalks on the hill in Compshe. Same exact material. And I'll be doing that same sort of thing here at Laughlin.
My first step is to measure for rough size. I use a sheetrock knife to cut the matboard to the rough measurements I've determined. I want my sidewalks to be a scale 6 foot wide, so I'll measure and mark the sidewalk width on the rough cut matboard. Next, I'll place the buildings so that the fronts are at the back of the sidewalk and trace their outline. Using a sheetrock knife, I'll cut out the building foundation perimeters. The matboard can be embossed with surface detail. I use the back edge of a hobby knife to emboss expansion joints. I use a retracted ballpoint pen to emboss round valve covers on the surface. Sidewalk patches add to the realism. Locations for patches can be inspired by the real world. Saw cuts are often made to accommodate electrical and plumbing changes, additions, and repairs between the street and a building. I try to keep this in mind when I'm laying out patches. I also add cracks to the pavement with the sharp side of the X-Acto knife. The most important part of any pavement project is the painting. Go out and observe the variety of color in concrete and asphalt paving near you. Oftentimes, people will go with a single shade of gray, but this seldom captures the coloration of actual concrete, especially as it ages. Iron within the aggregates used to make the concrete oxidizes over time, and depending on the concentration of iron, the color typically ranges from gray to tan, and older concrete can even feature a rust-like, almost orange color. Capturing this variety adds a lot of realism to the pavement on your layout. I use about 5 to 6 colors of craft paint in a range of grays and tans to paint my concrete. This gives a very nice variety of color that mimics real concrete. I use these natural sponges sold as silk sponges to apply the paint. They usually come in a package with the sponges being about 2 inches in diameter. I cut them in quarters with scissors so that I can have many small pieces, since it is necessary to have one for each color. I place a bit of each color in a plastic paint palette and place a bit of sponge in each. Keeping the sponge fairly dry, the paint is applied by dabbing the sponge onto the surface with a light touch and rotating it as you blot to keep the pattern from becoming too uniform. I keep applying colors until the surface is completely covered and has the color variation that I want. The last color I use for this technique is usually the first that I applied. This tends to tie things back together. Using low-tack painter's tape, I mask the edges of the patches and treat them similarly, generally going for a lighter shade than the surrounding surface. To represent new patches, I might go almost completely light gray. My next step is to apply a wash. I like the way enamel washes spread and prefer to use them over acrylic washes, and they work well over acrylic paints. I apply the wash over the cracks with a fine brush. I use a second brush with clean mineral spirits to dilute the wash and make it run into the cracks. If the surface wash is too heavy, I will clean up with a cotton swab. Next, I will adhere the pavement to the layout. I place the pavement where it needs to be glued and trace around it. Remove any ground cover before applying rubber cement to the bottom of the pavement and the top of the layout, following the cement manufacturer's instructions. I use rubber cement because later processes will use water, which can seep under the pavement and release water-based glues and cause the matboard to curl up. Ask me how I know. Used properly, rubber cement grabs so quickly and holds so well that there is no need to weigh down the pavement. My next step is to apply some zip textured dirt to blend the edges of the sidewalk and foundations. See my video about texture and topsoil for more information on zip texture. I use a large soft brush to sweep the dirt up to the pavement and then sweep any dirt from the top of the pavement. I wet the dirt sparingly with wet water. You can use a paper towel to remove the dirt from the surface if it's too heavy. One of the great things about zip texturing is that a thin layer of it spreads over the surrounding surfaces, imparting the dirt color to those objects. Use caution here while spraying the wet water because the alcohol can attack the acrylic paint on the pavement. Once that is dry, I apply static grass along the foundation perimeters by applying my static grass glue sparingly with a hobby syringe. Check out my static grass tutorial, linked above, for more in-depth tips. Having grass growing at the foundation edges grounds the building to the layout. The next step is to apply some additional weathering using pan pastels. These are artist pastel chalks suspended in an adhesive medium so they stick to the surfaces where they are applied. I use a large soft artist brush or makeup brush to apply it, blotting excess powder off the brush. If you overdo it, you can clean the surface with a damp paper towel. There is no need to top coat this weathering layer. Matboard has many other modeling uses. This shed was built using matboard, and the interior of this station is created using embossed matboard and styrene strips. It's a very handy and economical modeling material. I hope you enjoyed this episode and learned a lot about simulating concrete surfaces. Asphalt and even weathered wood can be simulated using similar techniques with different paint colors. The most important thing I can teach you is to learn to observe the world around you and practice your techniques until you feel you have real-world results. Keep in mind that larger concrete foundations, platforms, and piers can be created using insulation foam, wood, or plaster, and the same finishing techniques we've used here. Thanks for stopping in, and as always, this is Scott Forbes wishing you happy modeling.